Imagine an untouched, multi-million-dollar blank canvas sitting in the very center of a crowded, wildly expensive city.
Which is pretty much unheard of.
Right. Normally, the rules of the game are simple. The highest bidder wins, the land is leveled, and a glass tower of luxury condos goes up.
Yep, the standard developer playbook.
Exactly. But today we're looking at a site where the city decided to completely rip up that playbook and, well, instead, hand the paintbrush directly to the neighborhood.
It really is a massive shift in how we think about urban space.
It is. So today we are opening up a stack of documents from wikiresidence.ca and infodrone.ca detailing the Hôtel-Dieu project.
Such a fascinating case study.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive with you today is to explore what has become, honestly, one of the most complex, ambitious, and closely watched urban redevelopment cases in Montreal as of 2026.
Right, and it's not just about Montreal.
No, not at all. We are using this specific site as a lens to understand exactly how modern cities are attempting to solve a housing crisis, a heritage crisis, and an environmental crisis, all at the exact same time on the exact same plot of land.
And it is a massive undertaking. When you read through these policy documents and the urban planning memos, they aren't just theoretical proposals anymore.
Yeah, we're actually doing it.
Exactly. They lay out this highly detailed, functional blueprint for a multi-dimensional transformation that, honestly, most major metropolitan areas would completely shy away from.
Just because of the logistics.
Oh, absolutely. The sheer logistical friction involved in something like this is usually enough to kill a project on day one.
Okay, let's unpack this because the physical space we are talking about here is staggering.
It really is huge.
We are looking at the former Hôtel-Dieu de Montreal. So for those who don't know, this is a massive historic hospital complex.
Right.
It sits right in the shadow of Mount Royal, bounded by Saint-Urbain Street, Dupins Avenue, and Du Parc Avenue. I mean, it is smack in the middle of major transit corridors.
Prime real estate.
Prime. And it officially closed its doors to patients back in 2017. So in any typical real estate market, a highly coveted plot of land like this is it's the ultimate prize.
Oh, developers would be fighting tooth and nail for it.
Exactly. But that is not what is happening here. The land hasn't been auctioned off to a private conglomerate.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that this specific site has become a real-world barometer.
A barometer for what, exactly?
For Montreal's political and, well, logistical ability to take large, incredibly expensive institutional surplus assets and transform them into what planners call complete living environments.
Ah, okay. Complete living environments.
Yeah. And the core tension that's explicitly outlined in these documents is the fight against the aggressive gentrification of the Plateau Mont-Royal area.
Which has been happening for a while.
Exactly. So the strategy detailed here is explicitly designed to bypass the traditional private market entirely.
Right. So they essentially hijacked the usual private market narrative.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
But before we can even look at the architectural blueprints or what is physically being built on this prime real estate, we really have to look at who actually managed to pull off this municipal coup.
Because the origin story matters.
Oh, it entirely dictates the physical outcome.
Yeah.
So the documents show this massive redevelopment is being spearheaded by a group called the Communauté Saint-Urbain, or the CSU.
Yes, and the timeline of the CSU's formation is totally critical to understanding how they succeeded. They weren't just, some reactionary group that formed overnight when the hospital announced its closure.
Right, they had a head start.
A huge head start. The groundwork actually started back in 2013, born out of a highly strategic consultation between three major structural pillars of the Plateau Mont-Royal community.
Right, and looking at the structural breakdown in the sources, you have one group acting as the administrative and logistical lead. That's the CDC Action Solidarité Grand Plateau.
Yep, that's the administrative side.
Then you have a coalition entirely focused on the intersection of shelter and healthcare, which is the Milton Park Community Coalition for Access to Housing and Health.
For the CCMP, yeah.
And finally, you have the Comité Logement du Plateau Mont-Royal, bringing that pure tenant advocacy and, housing rights perspective.
Exactly. They recognized really early on that a fractured community response would just be easily swept aside by well-funded private developers.
Divide and conquer.
Exactly. So from those three foundational pillars in 2013, this coalition strategically swelled. I mean, today the CSU includes nearly 60 different member organizations.
Which is wild. And the diversity of that coalition is what really strikes me. You have the heavy hitters of the social and health sector, right? Like the Missional Brewery, Sun Youth, and the Montreal Women's Center.
Really vital community resources.
Yeah. But sitting right next to them at the negotiating table, you have strict heritage preservationists and environmental advocates. Groups like Heritage Montreal and Les Amis de la Montagne.
Right.
Plus, you've got the groups providing the actual technical and architectural muscle to pull this off, like Atelier Habitation Montreal and Rayside La Bossière.
So like the Ross.
It's like an urban Avengers team. And together, they somehow managed to force a massive transition in zoning from strictly institutional to mixed use.
allowing for that residential and community integration, yeah.
Right. But hold on, I have to push back here for a
That
second.
seems sure.
Because, I mean, I have seen neighborhood strata councils go to absolute war over, like, the color of a hallway carpet.
Oh, yeah, local politics can be brutal.
Right. So how on earth did 60 distinct organizations groups that, traditionally compete for the exact same limited municipal funding manage to agree on a multi-million-dollar master plan without the whole thing just collapsing into bureaucratic infighting?
It's a really great question, and the feasibility studies highlight exactly how difficult it was. But the expert analysis in these documents points to a specific unifying metric they rallied around,
Which was?
a value factor called social and benefits. This massive, somewhat unwieldy mobilization of 60 organizations was actually the exact critical mass required to act as a political shield.
So they needed the numbers.
Exactly. The logic was pretty simple. If they didn't present a completely united front, the city would be forced to privatize the land just to offload the maintenance costs,
So it was do or die.
basically. By maintaining that coalition, they kept the site in the public domain. And keeping it in the public domain is really the only mechanism that permanently prevents real estate speculation.
Because they aren't driven by investors.
Right. They aren't trying to generate luxury profit margins. Their unifying goal is addressing urgent, immediate community needs on the plateau. And that shared existential threat is what kept the coalition intact.
Wow. So the sheer undeniable size of the coalition made it politically impossible for the city to ignore them.
Exactly.
And because they successfully fought to keep the site public, they essentially earned the right to design a microcity from scratch.
They got the keys to the castle.
They did. So let's crack open the actual blueprint. What exactly are they putting inside this new mixed-use zone?
Well, the housing component is where you see the most radical departure from standard urban development. The master plan dictates the creation of roughly 300 to 310 total housing units across the site.
Okay, that's a solid number of units.
It is. And it comes with a strict mandate targeting 20% non-market housing.
And the way they are physically distributing those units is frankly brilliant. They aren't just clearing the lot to build, generic high-density residential towers.
No, they're working with the history.
Yeah, about 150 of those units are being created by physically retrofitting 3 of the massive historic pavilions on the site.
Right, the Le Royer, the Jean Mons, and the Masson pavilions.
Exactly. Then they're balancing that by building about 160 new units from the ground up. But they're specifically placing those new builds on the old asphalt parking lots.
So they aren't eating into the historic footprint.
Right. And who those 310 units are designed for is just as heavily regulated as where they are built, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The target demographics explicitly listed in the planning sources include families, seniors, students, and, crucially, people at risk of homelessness.
Right.
Or those with what the documents refer to as atypical life paths.
Okay, here's where it's really interesting. Because if they stopped at housing, it would just be a standard, albeit large, social housing project.
Which is fine, but not revolutionary.
Exactly. But they are insisting on maintaining the site's historical vocation of healing. The 2024 and 2025 proposals include an ambulatory surgery center and dedicated medical research spaces integrated directly into the site.
Right on the same footprint.
Yeah. And culturally, they've secured the Musée des Hospitaliers, which is located at 201 de Pins Avenue West, and renewed its lease through at least 2027.
It's a really deep mix of uses.
It is. Add to that daycares like the CPE's artist studios and community gardens. I mean, it's like they were building a highly curated terrarium of urban life.
A terrarium, I like that.
But practically speaking, how does this actually function on like a random Tuesday afternoon? You are physically mixing an ambulatory surgery center with artist studios, a daycare full of toddlers, and housing for people actively exiting homelessness.
Sounds chaotic on paper.
Right. Doesn't cramming all those wildly different demographics into one shared courtyard create immense social friction?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of modern urban planning, that intentional friction, that overlapping of daily life, is the very definition of a complete living environment.
Oh, okay. So the friction is the point.
Essentially, yes. For decades, traditional urban planning has relied on zoning to isolate different demographics and services. We zone the medical research centers into specialized districts.
Right, the hospital zone.
Yeah, and then we push the social housing to the industrial outskirts, and the artist studios just pop up wherever the commercial rent is cheapest.
Very segregated.
Exactly. What the CSU is doing here is structurally forcing these groups to share the same footprint. The goal outlined in the document is to destigmatize those atypical life paths through daily exposure.
That makes a lot of sense.
It creates a self-sustaining social ecosystem. So an artist might maintain the community garden, a senior citizen might read to kids at the daycare, and a person transitioning out of homelessness doesn't have to commute across the city for social support.
Because the healthcare and the social workers are literally across the courtyard.
Precisely. It's forcing community interaction by design, rather than treating different demographics like elements that need to be quarantined from one another.
That is wild. And what's wild is that they didn't just theorize this on paper for a decade, right? We actually have proof of concept based on the timeline in the sources.
Yes, the transitional phase.
Right. So from 2014 to 2022, they were locked in the mobilization and feasibility phase. That included leveraging the Office de Consultation Publique de Montreal, the OCPM, as a democratic lever to force public consultations.
Right, and securing funding from the Montreal Investment Fund, or RSQ.
Yeah, but then from 2022 to 2026, they entered this transitional occupation phase.
Right, and that transitional phase is a totally critical strategy. They didn't just let these massive stone buildings sit dark and empty.
Just gathering dust.
Exactly, gathering dust and accumulating maintenance debt while the architects finalized the master blueprints.
They actively proved the site's utility in real time. The docs show they turned parts of the site into a massive COVID-19 testing clinic when the city desperately needed space.
A brilliant pivot.
Right. And they partnered with the Mission Old Brewery to use the Leroyer Pavilion as an emergency winter shelter. They essentially proved to the municipality that this space could actively serve the urgent, immediate needs of the population.
All while the long-term tenure planning was still happening in the background.
Yeah.
And that operational success leads us to the physical impact on the surrounding geography. Because, you know, a complex terrarium like this doesn't exist in a vacuum.
No, it spills over into the streets.
Exactly. When you drop a complete, highly active living environment right into the middle of the Plateau Mont Royal, it physically, ecologically, and economically alters the streets surrounding it.
The ripple effect is massive. Let's look at the new Avenue de Pin. The documents highlight a radical physical transformation of the sector stretching between Saint Laurent Boulevard and Du Parc Avenue.
It's a totally different street now.
Yeah. They implemented protected, elevated one-way bike lanes to change the traffic flow. They ripped up the concrete and planted over 150 new trees, specifically to counter the urban heat island effect that plagues that dense part of the city.
And the ecological strategy there is vital. By removing those massive swaths of asphalt parking lots, which, you know, act like giant thermal batteries baking the neighborhood in the summer.
Ugh.
By replacing them with 150 trees and community gardens, they are engineering a major urban cool island. And that benefits the entire surrounding postal code, not just the residents of the project.
And they are anchoring that new green space with distinct social gathering points, too. The plans detail a new public square at Jane Man Street and a beautifully designed parvis-like an open architectural plaza right in front of the Hôtel-Dieu Chapel.
It completely changes the pedestrian flow.
Yeah, physically improving the neighborhood's access to Jean Mance Park and Mount Royal. Plus, the transit integration is deeply woven into the city's broader goals. You already have the 80, 129, and 144 bus networks servicing the site.
Right.
But the documents show this development is being heavily integrated with the future tramway planned in Montreal's 2050 Urban Planning and Mobility Plan, the PUM.
But, you know, the environmental impact of this project goes far beyond planting trees and optimizing bus routes.
Yeah.
There's a deeply technical concept highlighted in the architectural analysis called embodied energy.
Oh, yes. The embodied energy argument is fascinating. It's almost like an architectural organ transplant.
Oh, how so?
Well, instead of letting the body die so you can harvest the land to build an entirely new organism, you are keeping the skeletal structure alive, retrofitting it, and giving it a new heart.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. Because when you demolish a massive 19th century stone structure, you expend an incomprehensible amount of energy.
Just to tear it down.
Exactly. You are burning diesel to fuel the wrecking machines. You are using fleets of trucks to transport thousands of tons of heavy rubble to a landfill.
Right.
And then you have to mine new raw materials, process them, and transport them back into the center of a crowded city to build a new tower.
It's massively wasteful.
It is. So by fighting to reuse the massive stone structures of the historic pavilions, Le Royer, Jean-Mance, Masson, the project drastically reduces the carbon footprint and the embodied energy of the entire development. As they say, the greenest building is often the one that already exists.
It is environmentally brilliant. I mean, the logic is sound. But I have to play devil's advocate here and push back on the sheer economics of this because the financials in these documents are heavy.
They are definitely substantial numbers.
Yeah, the sources state that the estimated investment for this complete transformation is several $100 million. They highlight very specific, massive allocations like $57.5 million earmarked just for transitional housing in Montreal,
Right.
and another $5.2 million from the city specifically for the inclusion of immigrants from 2024 to 2026.
Yep. It's a huge commitment.
Several $100 million is an incredibly steep price tag. So from a purely fiscal bureaucratic standpoint, isn't it a massive drain on the state to rehabilitate drafty, complicated heritage hospital buildings instead of just, selling that prime, highly coveted land to a private developer?
Just take the cash and walk away.
Exactly. Take a massive one-time cash injection for the city and walk away.
Well, it is the most common political critique of projects like this, right?
Yeah.
And the documents actually break down the financial modeling to address exactly that argument.
Okay, what do they say?
What the purely capitalist critique misses is the cost of doing nothing. An empty, deteriorating mega hospital is classified by the state as a surplus asset.
Right.
And surplus assets are incredibly, shockingly costly. Even when they're completely empty, they drain state funds every single day.
Really? How?
Well, you have to pay for round-the-clock security to prevent vandalism. You have to pump in minimum heating to stop the pipes from bursting during a freezing Montreal winter.
Oh, right, the pipes.
And you have to pay for ongoing structural maintenance so the facade doesn't literally collapse onto the sidewalk.
Wow. So the city is essentially bleeding money just to keep a chain link fence around an empty building.
Exactly. So the CSU's economic model is based on transforming that chronic financial drain into a hub that actively generates a local social economy.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes, the initial capital expenditure is very high. But by keeping the land in the public domain and injecting this specific mix of 310 housing units, healthcare facilities, and cultural spaces, you create long-term financial viability that outpaces a one-time real estate sale.
It pays off over time.
Right. For example, the documents note that the new pedestrian flow and the bike lanes on Avenue des Pins create a direct, measurable value premium for the commercial businesses on nearby Saint-Denis Street.
Oh, it stimulates the local tax base.
Exactly. And furthermore, by providing stable, supportive housing, especially for those atypical life paths, you're actively reducing the downstream societal costs of homelessness.
Right, the invisible costs.
Exactly. The emergency room visits, the policing, the crisis interventions, those downstream costs are astronomically high.
It's an investment in structural prevention rather than endless expensive reaction. And the documents show that the city of Montreal has actually bought into this long-term economic model, haven't they?
Yes, they have.
According to the sources, the city has officially integrated the reevaluation of institutional sites into their 2026 budgetary priorities.
Which is a huge win.
It is. The permanent implementation of the Hôtel-Dieu Project is really just waiting on the finalization of funding agreements with various levels of government, and those are expected to clear this year in 2026.
Which is exactly why this site is the ultimate urban test case. If the CSU pulls this off, it proves to other cities that you do not have to cede your most valuable, historically significant land to traditional market forces just because the initial rehabilitation costs are high.
There's another way.
There's a highly viable, economically sound alternative.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? When you hear politicians or planners talk about dense, dry urban policy documents like the 2050 Urban Planning and Mobility Plan or the report of the expert group on the future of surplus hospital buildings, it is incredibly easy for your eyes to glaze over.
Oh, totally. They sound so bureaucratic.
Right. It's easy to dismiss them as just red tape. But the Hôtel-Dieu Project proves that these documents are real-time, highly actionable blueprints.
They shape the reality of the city.
Yes. They are blueprints for fighting the housing crisis by physically building 300 diverse, non-market reliant units. They are blueprints for fighting climate change by ripping up asphalt, planting 150 trees to cool the streets, and saving thousands of tons of embodied energy by, well, refusing to demolish our history.
It's an all-in-one solution.
Exactly. And most importantly, they are blueprints for completely rethinking how we live together. It shows that cities absolutely have a choice when deciding the fate of their most coveted land. They don't have to just sell off the blank canvas to the highest bidder.
And, exploring this project raises a deeply important question, one that really builds on the very foundation of everything we've looked at today.
Oh, what's that?
Well, the sources detail the aggressive integration of social housing with an ambulatory surgery center, all while preserving the historical Cité des Hospitalières.
Right, the terrarium idea.
Exactly. So what if the future of urban healthcare isn't a massive, sterile, isolated mega hospital out on the edge of town surrounded by a sea of parking lots?
Like we're used to.
Right. What if instead medical services are deeply physically embedded right within our daily lives, sharing walls with our daycares, our artist studios, and our community gardens?
Wow.
Does living in a community structurally designed around both daily social support and highly accessible healthcare fundamentally redefine what it means to be healthy in a modern city?
That is a brilliant, fascinating thought to leave on. The canvas doesn't just belong to the neighborhood actually is the art.
Well said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Hôtel-Dieu Project. Keep looking closely at the changing spaces, the retrofitted buildings, and the empty lots in your own cities, because there's always a deeper mechanism at work beneath the surface. Catch you next time.